He stood there in the entryway of our apartment, chest heaving slightly, looking like he'd just sprinted a marathon and won gold. But all I could see was the way his hands were shaking. Not the "I'm terrified" shake. I know that one. This was the "I just got away with murder" shake. "I got it," Marshall said, the words tumbling out of his mouth before he'd even fully closed the door behind him. He dropped his leather messenger bag onto the hardwood floor with a heavy thud, neglecting the side table where it lived for the last 6 years. I looked up from the kitchen island where I was nursing a lukewarm cup of tea and trying to salvage a grant proposal that was currently bleeding red ink. Got what? The promotion. Better. The Phoenix Summit, he said, practically vibrating. He walked over, bypassing the usual hello kiss to grab a bottle of water from the fridge, chugging half of it in one go. They want me to lead the entire tech integration pitch. Me, not Stevens. Not the VP, me. Marshall, that's incredible. I put my pen down, trying to match his energy. I thought they were sending the senior team. They were. Change of plans. The client specifically asked for fresh eyes, and apparently my eyes are fresh enough. He laughed, a sound that felt a little too loud for our small living room. He pulled out his phone, tapping furiously. I have to be there for the full duration, 2 weeks. Strategy sessions, networking mixers, the whole 9 yards. It's huge, Imogen. This is the VP track. This is it. 2 weeks? I repeated. The time frame hung in the air. Marshall had done conferences before. 3 days in Chicago, 4 days in Austin. 2 weeks was an eternity in corporate time. That's a long time to be away. I know. He finally looked at me, really looked at me, and his face softened into that expression, the one that had kept me anchored to him for 11 years, the U.S. against the world look. But think about the bonus structure. Think about the house down payment. If I land this account, we aren't looking at fix-upper condos in Queens anymore. We're looking at actual houses in Westchester. I stood up and walked around the island to hug him. He felt tense, his muscles coiled tight. "I'm proud of you," I said into his shoulder. And I was, or I wanted to be. But there was a low hum of anxiety in my gut, a frequency only I seemed to hear. "When do you leave?" "Friday," he said, pulling back. "This Friday, that's in 3 days. They want to move fast. Pre-summit workshops start Monday morning, but I need to be there over the weekend to prep the slide decks with the on-site team." He was already mentally packing, his eyes darting around the room. "Hey," I said, an idea sparking that I thought would bridge the gap. "I have roughly 1 million vacation days banked that I'm going to lose if I don't use them. Why don't I come with you? I won't get in your way. I can hang out by the pool, explore the desert. Maybe we can get dinner a couple of nights." Marshall's expression shifted. It wasn't a glare, exactly. It was more like a shutter coming down over a camera lens, a micro flinch. "Imogen, babe, you know I'd love that, but..." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "This isn't a vacation. It's going to be brutal. 15-hour days, client dinners every single night until midnight. I'd be leaving you alone in a hotel room for 2 weeks. You'd be bored out of your skull." "I like being bored. I can bring books. I can work remotely." "It's not just that," he said, his voice sharpening just a fraction. "I need to focus. Total immersion. If you're there, I'm going to be worrying about whether you're having a good time, or if we should skip the networking drinks to grab dinner. I can't have that distraction. Not for this account. This is my career we're talking about." The word distraction landed like a slap. I stepped back, feeling the familiar sting of being too much, too needy. "Right. Sorry, I wasn't thinking." "No, hey." He caught my hand, pulling me back in, smoothing over the crack in the facade instantly. "I didn't mean it like that. It's just, the stakes are so high. You get that, right?" "I get it," I lied. I forced a smile. "You go. You conquer Phoenix. I'll hold down the fort." "You're the best," he said, kissing my forehead. "I promise when I get back, we'll do a real trip. Just us. Somewhere with zero Wi-Fi." He went into the bedroom to start pulling out his suitcase, and I stood in the kitchen, listening to the zip-zip of zippers, trying to figure out why the man who just invited me to spend the rest of my life with him in Westchester couldn't handle me spending 2 weeks with him in Arizona. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from, or what time it is for you. The packing process was a piece of theater I hadn't realized I was watching until much later. Marshall was usually a chaos packer, throwing things into a duffel bag 10 minutes before the Uber arrived. But for Phoenix, he was meticulous. "Blue tie or the striped one?" he asked on Thursday night, holding them up against his chest in the bedroom mirror. "The blue brings out your eyes," I said from the bed where I was folding his socks. "But the striped one says, I know more about algorithms than you do." "Striped it is." He tossed it into the suitcase. "Did you see where I put that new cologne?" I paused mid-fold. "What new cologne?" The one Russell got me for my birthday? The woody one?" "Russell got you a Home Depot gift card for your birthday," I reminded him. Marshall didn't even blink. "No, the sample set. He gave me a bunch of samples. I like the sandalwood one." "I thought I bought a full bottle." He started rummaging through the bathroom drawers, his voice muffled. "Found it." He came out holding a bottle of Le Labo Santal 33. That's a $200 bottle of cologne. Marshall was a drugstore deodorant guy. Since when was he wearing niche perfumery? "I didn't know you bought that," I said, keeping my voice light. "Impulse buy," he muttered, tucking it deep into his toiletry bag. "Gotta smell like success to attract success, right?" I watched him pack. He included his lucky cufflinks, the ones his dad gave him, and 3 crisp white dress shirts that he'd had professionally pressed, something he never did. He was curating a version of himself that I rarely saw, the high-powered executive. "Do you have the itinerary?" I asked, "in case of emergencies?" "It's all in the calendar invite I sent you," he said, zipping the suitcase shut. "Hyatt Regency downtown. But honestly, if there's an emergency, just call my cell. I'll have it on me 24/7. The morning of the departure was a blur of frantic energy. The Uber was 5 minutes away. We stood by the door, the heavy silence of an upcoming separation settling over us. "I'm going to miss you," he said, grabbing my shoulders and pulling me in for a hug that felt desperate. He buried his face in my neck, inhaling sharply. "Like crazy." "It's only 2 weeks," I said, echoing his words from Tuesday. "Knock 'em dead." He pulled back, his hands lingering on my arms. He looked at me with glassy eyes. "You know I love you, right? No matter what happens with work, you're my rock." "I know," I said, though the phrasing felt odd. "No matter what happens." "I'll call you tonight," he promised. "Probably late because of the welcome dinner, but I'll call." "I'll be up." He grabbed the handle of his suitcase. Okay, I gotta go." He opened the door and rolled the suitcase out into the hallway. He didn't look back. Usually he'd wave from the elevator. This time he just marched forward, head down, thumb already flying across his phone screen as the elevator doors slid shut. I locked the door and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. It was quiet. The apartment suddenly felt twice as big and half as warm. I walked back into the bedroom to clean up the rejected clothes he'd left on the bed. That's when I smelled it, the scent of Santal 33 lingering in the air. It was heavy, woody, and expensive. It didn't smell like my husband. It smelled like a stranger who had just engaged in a hostile takeover of my life. The first 3 days were exactly as he promised. He called on Friday night from the hotel room. The background was beige and generic, the standard corporate neutral palette. He looked tired. "Flight was hell," he said, loosening his tie, "and the client is already demanding changes to the deck. I'm going to be up all night." "Did you eat?" I asked, cradling my phone on the couch. "Room service. A $30 club sandwich that tasted like cardboard. How's things there? How's the cat?" "Pepper misses you. She's been sleeping on your side of the bed." "Tell her I'll bring her back a cactus," he joked. Saturday and Sunday were similar. Brief calls, mostly him venting about internal politics and networking fatigue. I felt guilty for my earlier suspicion. He sounded genuinely exhausted. He sounded like the Marshall I knew, overworked and slightly cranky about it. But then came Monday, day 4. I waited for the call at 9 p.m., then 10 p.m., then 11 p.m. At 11:30 p.m., a text came through. Marshall. Hey babe, client dinner is running super late. Drinks are flowing and I can't step away without looking rude. Going to crash hard after this. Love you. Talk tomorrow. Okay, get some rest, I texted back. Tuesday, day 5. No call. Marshall, 10:15 p.m. Absolute nightmare of a day. Presenting tomorrow at 8 a.m. Need to prep. Sorry, miss you. Wednesday, day 6. Marshall, 6:00 p.m. Going dark for the evening. Team building event. No phones allowed. Love you. I sat at the kitchen table staring at that text. No phones allowed? At a tech summit? We lived in a world where tech conferences were literally designed around people tweeting in real time. The idea of a no-phone policy at a digital strategy networking event was absurd. I scrolled back through our messages. The shift was subtle but undeniable. The emojis had disappeared. The questions about my day had vanished. It was just a broadcast of excuses. Too tired, too busy, too much work. My thumb hovered over the call button. I knew if I called and he didn't answer, I would spiral. If I called and he did answer and sounded annoyed, I would feel like the nagging wife he was, clearly terrified I would become. But the silence in the apartment was getting louder. It wasn't just quiet. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a secret being kept. I went to the fridge and poured a glass of wine. I told myself I was being paranoid. Marshall was on the verge of a promotion. Stress made people shut down. This was normal. But then I remembered the cologne and the sudden enthusiasm for the gym over the last 6 months and the way he'd started taking his phone into the bathroom every morning. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being observant. And for the first time in 11 years, my observations were leading me to a conclusion I physically didn't want to articulate. I put the wine glass down. I needed to know. Not think. Know. It was Thursday afternoon, day 7. I was at work, sitting in my cubicle at the nonprofit, staring at a spreadsheet that hadn't made sense for an hour. My heart was doing a weird, fluttery thing against my ribs. I pulled up the browser and searched Hyatt Regency Phoenix downtown. I dialed the number before I could talk myself out of it. Hyatt Regency Phoenix, this is Sarah. How can I help you? The voice was cheerful, professional, a stark contrast to the dread pooling in my stomach. Hi, I said, my voice sounding thin. I'm trying to reach a guest, Marshall Brenner. One moment, please. The hold music was jazz, upbeat, frantic jazz. I stared at a picture of Marshall and me from our wedding that sat on my desk. We looked so young, so stupidly happy. Ma'am, the receptionist was back. Yes? I'm sorry, I don't see a Marshall Brenner listed in our guest directory. The world tilted slightly to the left. Can you check again? Brenner. He checked in last Friday. He's there for the tech summit. Keyboard clacking. I have a Marshall Branford and a Michelle Brenner? No, Marshall Brenner, Marshall James Brenner. I'm sorry, ma'am. No one by that name is staying with us. My hand gripped the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. Is the tech summit happening there? The Phoenix Tech Integration Summit? Pause. I don't show any large conferences in-house this week. We have a dentist convention in the ballroom, but that ends tomorrow. Dentists. Okay, I said. Okay, maybe I have the wrong Hyatt. Is there another one downtown? There's the Hyatt Place on 2nd Avenue, or the Regency in Scottsdale. Can you transfer me? One moment. I spent the next 45 minutes in a telephonic loop of hell. I called the Hyatt Place. I called the Sheraton. I called the Marriott. I called every major hotel in downtown Phoenix that looked like it cost more than $200 a night. No Marshall Brenner. No reservation found. Sorry, ma'am. I hung up the phone after the 5th hotel. I felt dizzy. Maybe he was staying at an Airbnb. Maybe the company booked it under a generic corp housing name. I was gaslighting myself in real time. You're crazy, Imogen. You heard him wrong. He probably said the Hilton and you heard Hyatt because you're tired. But I hadn't heard him wrong. I had the calendar invite. It said, location, Hyatt Regency Phoenix. I looked at the screen again. The invite was right there. He had typed it. He wasn't at the Hyatt. He wasn't at the tech summit. He wasn't in Phoenix. I stood up, grabbing my purse. I couldn't be at work. I felt like I was going to throw up. I told my boss I had a migraine, which wasn't entirely a lie, and took the subway home, the rhythmic clack-clack of the train tracks sounding like a countdown timer. Sleep was impossible. I lay in bed at 2 a.m. staring at the ceiling fan cutting through the shadows. Marshall's side of the bed was pristine, the pillow fluffed, mocking me. He wasn't in Phoenix. So where was he? I threw the covers off and padded into the living room. The blue light of my laptop screen felt harsh in the dark apartment. I opened a private browser window. I logged into our joint American Express account. This was the everything card. Groceries, utilities, and, crucially, Marshall's reimbursable work expenses. He always put flight and hotel deposits on this card to get the points. I clicked on pending transactions. My breath hitched. There were charges, a lot of them. Red Rock Spa, Sedona AZ, 520 Mariposa Latin-inspired grill, Sedona AZ, 184.50. L'Auberge de Sedona, deposit, 2,200 €. Pink Jeep Tours, Sedona AZ, 145 €, Sedona. He wasn't at a tech conference in a concrete jungle. He was in the Red Rocks. He was at a spa. I clicked on the Red Rock Spa charge details. The merchant category code was Health and Beauty, $5.20. That wasn't a facial. That was a package. I opened a new tab and Googled Red Rock Spa menu. I scrolled until I found a match for the price point. The Vortex Couples Ritual, 90 minutes, side-by-side massage, energy balancing, champagne service, 520s. I covered my mouth with my hand to stifle a sob that was threatening to rip out of my throat. Couples Ritual, champagne service. Marshall hated massages. He complained when I asked him to rub my shoulders for 2 minutes. He said strangers touching him was weird. Yet here he was, paying $500 to lay on a table next to someone. Harper. It had to be Harper, the work wife. The woman he'd been mentioning casually for 18 months. Harper had a great idea today. Harper brought bagels. Harper is hilarious. I looked at the date of the charge. Tuesday, the day he was too exhausted to talk because of the client dinner. He wasn't exhausted. He was post-massage relaxed, drinking champagne with another woman. I took a screenshot of the transaction list. My hands were shaking so bad I had to use 2 fingers to press the keys. The betrayal wasn't just the sex, it was the vacation. We hadn't been on a real vacation in 3 years because he was too busy. But he had time for Jeep tours and energy balancing with her. I sat there in the dark, the glow of the screen illuminating the ruin of my marriage, and I felt something snap. The crying stopped. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. He thought he was safe. He thought I was the stupid wife at home, watering his plants and feeding his cat while he played house in the desert. He was wrong. The credit card told me where and what, but it didn't tell me how long. I needed the history. I needed to know if this was a fling or a life. Marshall was careful with his phone. He slept with it under his pillow. He took it to the shower. But Marshall was also lazy about tech hygiene. I remembered the old iPad. It was a first-generation iPad Air. Cracked screen, battery that lasted 20 minutes. He tossed it in the bottom drawer of the media console 2 years ago when he upgraded, but he never wiped it, and he never logged out of iCloud. I dug through the nest of HDMI cables and dead batteries until my fingers brushed the cold aluminum. I pulled it out. It was dead, obviously. I found a lightning cable and plugged it in. The empty battery icon flashed red. I waited. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Please turning on. Please turn on. Finally, the white Apple logo appeared. The screen lit up, glowing through the spiderweb cracks. I swiped to unlock. He hadn't changed his passcode in a decade. 1986, his birth year. I tapped the green messages icon. The device groaned, trying to download 2 years of data over our Wi-Fi. The messages started populating. At first, just old threads with me, with his mom, with Russell. Then a name popped to the top. Harper Work. I tapped it. The most recent messages hadn't synced yet. The iPad was still catching up, but the history was there. I scrolled back. Way back. 18 months ago. Harper. Thanks for the coffee. You saved my life. Marshall. Anytime. Rookie mistake not caffeinating before the sales meeting. Innocent. 12 months ago. Harper. This meeting is death. Save me. Marshall. Look at me. I'm making a funny face. Did it work? Harper. Stop. I'm going to laugh out loud. Flirty, but plausible. 6 months ago. Harper. I had a dream about you last night. Marshall. Oh yeah? Was it a good one? Harper. The best. We weren't at work. Marshall. I wish I was there. Lines crossed. 3 months ago. Harper. I hate her, Marshall. I hate that you go home to her. Marshall. Don't start. You know I'm only there for appearances right now. I'm trying to figure out the finances. Harper. It feels like you're stalling. Marshall. I'm not, I swear. The marriage has been dead for years. We're just roommates who share a bank account. I love you. Dead for years. I read that line 3 times. Dead for years. 3 months ago was our anniversary. We went to that Italian place on Court Street. He gave me a card that said, "To my forever partner." He teared up during the toast. He was lying to her too. Or he was lying to me. Or he was just a pathological liar who spun whatever narrative suited the person he was trying to sleep with. I kept scrolling, my stomach twisting into tight knots. 2 weeks ago. Marshall. I booked L'Auberge, the Creekside Cottage. Harper. Marshall. That place is insane. Can we afford it? Marshall. I'm pulling from the investment fund. Imogen never checks it. It's on me, baby. A full week of just us. No hiding. Imogen never checks it. I looked up from the screen, staring at his reflection in the dark TV. You idiot, I whispered. You absolute arrogant idiot. I needed to save this. This was evidence. This was leverage. I tried to take a screenshot holding the power and home buttons. The screen flashed white. Click. Good. I tried to scroll down to get the dead for years text. Suddenly, the Messages app froze. I tapped the screen. Nothing. Then the screen went black. A spinning wheel appeared in the center. No. No, no, no. The iPad rebooted. I waited, sweating. When it came back on, I tapped Messages again. Sign into iCloud. It had kicked him out. He must have changed his password recently, or the attempt to sync 2 years of heavy data onto an ancient device triggered a security lockout. Damn it! I slammed my hand on the coffee table. I didn't have the new password. If I tried to guess it, it would send an alert to his phone in Sedona. Your Apple ID is being used on a new device. I had the one screenshot of the L'Auberge booking confirmation text, but I lost the "marriage is dead" thread. I lost the timeline. I checked my own phone's camera roll. I hadn't taken a picture of the iPad screen yet. I was relying on the iPad's internal screenshot function. I unlocked the iPad again and went to Photos. Maybe the screenshot saved locally before the crash. There it was, one grainy screenshot. I quickly airdropped it to my phone. Sending, sent. But that was all I had. One image. It was enough to prove the trip, but it wasn't the manifesto of betrayal I had just read. I had seen the smoking gun, but now it was gone, dissolved back into the digital ether. I needed more. I needed something physical, something he couldn't delete, couldn't password protect, couldn't crash. I turned on the lights, all of them. It was 3:30 a.m. and our apartment looked like a crime scene waiting to happen. I started in the bedroom. I checked his nightstand. Nothing but chapstick and a book he'd been pretending to read for 6 months. I moved to the closet. I patted down the pockets of his winter coats, a few receipts for coffee, a gum wrapper. Then I went to the drawer. Every house has one. The junk drawer where important papers go to die. In our house, it was the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet in the makeshift office corner of the living room. Marshall was a hoarder of paperwork he didn't understand. I pulled the drawer open. It groaned on its tracks. Old tax returns, warranties for appliances we didn't own anymore, a stack of birthday cards. I dug to the bottom. Under a folder labeled Medical Records, I found a manila envelope. It wasn't labeled. I opened the clasp. Inside was a lease agreement, standard New York boilerplate, property address, 442 Union Street, Unit 3B, Brooklyn, NY. Tenants Marshall Brenner and Harper Willis. Union Street. That was Park Slope. That was prime real estate. I flipped to the signature page. Signed 3 weeks ago. Lease start date. December 1st. That was 2 weeks from now. I looked at the numbers. Monthly rent, $4,200. Security deposit, $4,200. Broker fee, $4,200. Total due at signing, $12,600. I flipped the page. There was a receipt stapled to the back. Certified check number 49992 drawn from Chase Bank. Chase Bank. We didn't have a Chase account. I ran to the bedroom and grabbed his backup wallet from the dresser, the one he used when he went running. Inside, tucked behind an expired library card, was a Chase debit card. He had opened a secret account. I went back to the living room and grabbed the investment fund folder from our actual filing system. 2 months ago, Marshall had transferred $30,000 from our joint savings into what he called a high-yield crypto trust. He showed me a brochure. He said it was low risk. I looked at the dates. The transfer out of our account happened 3 days before the date on the cashier's check receipt in the lease folder. He didn't invest our money. He stole it. He stole $30,000 of our life savings to pay the first, last, and security on a love nest with Harper. I sank onto the floor, surrounded by the paper trail of my own destruction. The lease was a 2-year commitment. This wasn't a fling. He wasn't confused. He was moving out. He was planning to come back from this trip, break up with me, and move directly into a brownstone with her. He was just waiting for the holidays to pass so he wouldn't look like the bad guy. I sat on the floor with the lease in my lap, feeling numb. My brain was firing rapidly, making connections I hadn't wanted to see before. I pulled out my phone and opened my calendar. I needed to cross-reference the dates from the text messages I'd briefly seen on the iPad, specifically 2 weeks ago, when they were booking the trip, November 4th. I stared at the date. The air left my lungs in a rush. November 4th. That was a Tuesday. I tapped on the date in my calendar. There was only one entry, ER visit, 10 a.m. I closed my eyes, and the memory washed over me, cold and sharp. I had been at work. I felt the cramp, sharp, twisting, then the blood. I knew immediately. I was 8 weeks pregnant. We hadn't told anyone yet. We were waiting for the safe zone. I had called Marshall 17 times. 10:15 a.m., called a Marshall, no answer. 10:18 a.m., called a Marshall, no answer. 10:22 a.m., called a Marshall, no answer. I was in the Uber to the hospital, crying, bleeding, terrified. 11:30 a.m., text from Marshall, can't talk, in a strategy meeting. Is everything okay? 11:32 a.m., text from me, please call me, emergency. 11:45 a.m., text from Marshall, babe, I really can't step out. Boss is on a warpath. Call you at lunch? He never called at lunch. I miscarried alone in a curtained-off room at Methodist Hospital. By the time I got home that night, he was already asleep. I told him the next morning. He hugged me, looked sad, said, we can try again. But now I knew what he was doing at 11:30 a.m. on November 4th. He wasn't in a strategy meeting. I remembered the text I saw on the iPad, timestamped that same morning. Marshall to Harper, 11:31 a.m. I booked l'auberge. It's on me, baby. He was booking their sex vacation while I was losing his child. He ignored my calls because he was busy securing the creekside cottage for his mistress. A sound ripped out of me, a guttural animal noise that didn't sound human. I clamped my hand over my mouth. Tears were streaming down my face, hot and fast. This wasn't just cheating. This was evil. This was a level of cruelty that I couldn't comprehend. He had looked me in the eye the next morning, while I was grieving, and lied. He had comforted me with the same hands that typed in his credit card number for her. The sadness died right then and there. It withered up and turned into ash, and from the ash something hard and jagged started to grow. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I stood up. "Okay," I said to the empty room. "Okay, Marshall." It was Friday morning, day 8. Marshall still wasn't back. I was leaving the apartment to go to the grocery store, mostly to get out of the suffocating air of the crime scene. I locked the door and turned toward the elevator. The door to 4B opened. It was Jonah. Jonah was our neighbor. Nice guy, worked in tech, kind of awkward. We usually just exchanged the standard, "How about this weather?" nod. "Oh, hey, Imogen," Jonah said, stopping in the hallway. He looked startled to see me. He was holding a bag of recycling. "Hey, Jonah." I pressed the elevator button. He stood there for a second, shifting his weight. He looked uncomfortable. "So, Marshall is away?" "Yeah," I said, not looking at him. "Business trip. Phoenix." "Right, Phoenix." Jonah scratched the back of his neck. Is he coming back soon?" I turned to look at him. His tone was weird. "Tuesday. Why?" Jonah looked at the floor, then at the ceiling, then finally at me. "Look, this is none of my business, and I hate being that guy, but what?" "I saw him leaving last Friday," Jonah said. "I was coming in with groceries." "Okay." "He wasn't taking an Uber to JFK, Imogen." Jonah stepped closer, lowering his voice. "He got into a black SUV. There was a woman in the back seat, blonde, glasses. Harper. Jonah grimaced. "They kissed, like really kissed, before he even got the door closed." My stomach dropped, but I kept my face stone still. "Thanks for telling me, Jonah. I thought you should know," he stammered. "I saw him posting Instagram stories about a conference, but the woman, she looked like she was ready for a beach." "Wait," I said. "You saw Instagram stories?" "Yeah. On his private account? The Marshall B side one?" I blinked. "He has a second Instagram account?" Jonah's face went pale. "Oh, God, you didn't know." "Show me," I commanded. Jonah pulled out his phone. He opened Instagram. He searched for the handle. "This account is private." "He follows me because we play COD sometimes," Jonah mumbled. He tapped the screen. And there it was. A photo posted 20 minutes ago. Marshall and Harper, clinking champagne glasses, the red rocks of Sedona in the background. They were wearing matching white robes. The caption read, "Zen mode activated. Life is good." I stared at the photo. My husband. The man who was working 15-hour days. The man who missed me like crazy. He was grinning like a frat boy on spring break. "Send me that screenshot," I said to Jonah. My voice was so calm it frightened me. "Imogen, Send it now." Jonah tapped his screen. My phone buzzed in my pocket. "I'm really sorry," Jonah whispered. "Don't be," I said, looking at the elevator doors as they finally slid open. "You just gave me the last nail for the coffin." I didn't go to the grocery store. I turned around, walked back to my apartment, and unlocked the door. I had the texts, I had the lease, I had the financial records, and now I had the photo. It was time to write an email. I sat at my kitchen island, the laptop screen burning my eyes. It was Saturday morning. Marshall was still in Sedona, presumably enjoying a sunrise yoga session or whatever the hell costs $150 at 8 a.m. I had spent the last 3 hours cyber-stalking Harper. It wasn't hard. Marshall had tagged her in that private Instagram post. Her profile was locked, obviously, but her bio had a link to a Donors Choose page for her classroom. She was a former teacher. From there, I found her old Facebook, open, And through her Facebook, I found him, Malcolm Willis. He wasn't what I expected. I expected a sleek corporate shark like Marshall was pretending to be, but Malcolm was normal. He was a high school principal in New Jersey. His profile picture was him and two little girls, maybe 5 and 7 years old, wearing matching pumpkin patch sweaters. He looked kind. He had laugh lines. He looked like the type of guy who coached soccer on weekends and actually enjoyed it. He had no idea his wife was currently in a creekside cottage in Arizona with my husband. I stared at the compose window of my anonymous Gmail account, truthseeker70to7@gmail.com. The cursor blinked. I dragged the files into the attachment bar. Lease agreement, unions PDF, Amex statement, Sedona PF text. Screenshot dead marriage. .jpg Instagram screenshot Zen mode JPG. My finger hovered over the keys. Sending this was the point of no return. Once I hit send, I wasn't just blowing up my life, I was blowing up his. I was blowing up those little girls' lives. I hesitated. Was this too cruel? Then I looked at the date on my phone, November 15th. I thought about the miscarriage. I thought about the text Marshall sent Harper. Just a couple more months and we can stop pretending. They were planning to blindside Malcolm after the holidays. They were going to let him have one last Christmas, thinking his family was whole, and then rip the rug out from under him in January. That was cruel. Giving him the truth now? That was mercy. I typed the subject line, "I'm sorry you have to find out this way." I wrote one sentence in the body. "Your wife isn't in Florida for a girls' trip. She's in Sedona with my husband. Here's the proof." I hit send. The screen refreshed. Message sent. I closed the laptop. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from adrenaline. The bomb was in the air. Now I just had to wait for the explosion. Tuesday, the day of the return. I took the day off work. I told my boss I had a medical follow-up, which garnered immediate sympathy given the miscarriage. I spent 6 hours cleaning the apartment. I scrubbed the grout in the shower until my fingers bled. I vacuumed the baseboards. I polished the wine glasses. I wanted the apartment to look perfect. I wanted it to look like the home he was throwing away. At 4 p.m. I started cooking. Risotto, mushroom and truffle oil risotto, Marshall's absolute favorite. It was a pain to make. You have to stir it constantly for 40 minutes, but the smell, earthy, rich, comforting. It smelled like home. I set the table, placemats, the good napkins, candles. I went to the bedroom and changed. I put on the navy blue wrap dress he bought me 3 years ago. The one he said made me look effortlessly classy. I did my hair. I put on makeup, just enough to look fresh, glowing. I looked in the mirror. I looked like the perfect devoted wife waiting for her war hero to return. Inside, I was a coiled spring. I rehearsed the lines in my head. I needed the timing to be perfect. If I rushed it, he would clam up. If I waited too long, I'd lose my nerve. Step 1, the welcome. Step 2, the trap. Step 3, the kill. The clock on the microwave read 6:45 p.m. He texted, "Just landed, grabbing an Uber. See you in 45. I poured myself a glass of water. I didn't drink wine yet. I needed to be razor sharp. At 7:35 p.m., the key turned in the lock. My heart hammered against my ribs. Thud, thud, thud. The door swung open. Marshall stepped in. He looked good. That was the first thing that hit me. He didn't look like a man who had spent 2 weeks in conference rooms under fluorescent lights. He was tan. He had that specific healthy glow you only get from spending $500 a day on self-care. His hair was a little lighter, sun-bleached. "Home, sweet home," he announced, dropping his suitcase. He spotted me in the kitchen. His face lit up. "Babe, you look... Wow, did you dress up for me?" "I missed you," I said, walking over. I forced my body to be loose, welcoming. He wrapped his arms around me. He smelled like Le Labo and something else. Coconut. Sunscreen. He smelled like a vacation. "God, I missed you too," he said, squeezing me tight. You have no idea." "How was the flight?" I asked into his chest, fighting the urge to vomit. "Brutal," he sighed, pulling back but keeping his hands on my waist. "Turbulence the whole way, and I sat next to a guy who wouldn't stop talking about crypto. I'm exhausted." "You look tired," I lied, reaching up to touch his cheek. "Your eyes are red." "Yeah, well, 14 days of staring at screens will do that. The summit was intense, non-stop." "Did you land the account?" It's looking good," he said, flashing a confident grin. "I think we nailed it. The client was super impressed with the final deck." "That's amazing, Marshall. I knew you would." He kissed me, a quick peck on the lips. "What is that smell? Is that risotto?" "Mushroom and truffle," I said. "Your favorite." "You are literally the best wife in the world," he said, and he didn't even stutter. The ease of it, the smoothness of the lie was terrifying. He walked past me toward the bedroom. "Let me just dump this bag and wash up. I feel gross. Airplane air, you know?" "Take your time," I called out. "Dinner needs 5 more minutes." I watched him walk down the hallway. He had a bounce in his step. He thought he was in the clear. He thought he had pulled off the perfect heist. I turned back to the stove and stirred the risotto. 1, 2, 3. Showtime. He came back out 10 minutes later, changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt. He looked relaxed. He poured himself a glass of wine from the bottle I'd opened. "So," he said, leaning against the counter while I plated the food, "what did I miss here? Anything exciting?" "Not much," I said, keeping my voice breezy. "Work was work. The cat threw up on the rug, the usual." I handed him a bowl. We moved to the small dining table. "This looks incredible," he said, taking a bite. Seriously, better than room service." "I bet," I said. "Although the Hyatt usually has decent food." "Hey, it was okay. You know how conference food is. Rubber chicken and soggy vegetables." I took a sip of my water. "Did the team go out at all? You said there were mixers." "Yeah, a few. We went to this Mexican place one night, and a steakhouse, but mostly we were just grinding in the war room." I watched him eat. He was enjoying the food. He was completely comfortable. "I'm assuming Harper was a big help," I asked, casually, like I was asking about the weather. Marshall's fork paused halfway to his mouth. It was a micro pause. If I hadn't been looking for it, I would have missed it. "Harper?" he said. He chewed, swallowed. Yeah, she was great. She's really good with the client relations side. Kept everyone organized." "That's good," I said. "I know you were worried she might be too inexperienced for a trip like this." "She stepped up," he said, taking a large gulp of wine. "She really pulled her weight." "I'm sure she did," I said. The silence stretched. I let it hang there for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Marshall shifted in his chair. "Why do you ask?" "Oh, no reason," I said. I put my fork down. I looked him dead in the eye. "It's just, I was surprised when I found out." "Found out what?" His voice pitched up slightly, a tiny crack in the armor. "About the trip," I said. "What about the trip?" He laughed, a nervous, jagged sound. "Imogen, you're being weird. What's going on? I know you weren't in Phoenix, Marshall." The color didn't just drain from his face. It vanished. He turned a sickly shade of gray. What? "I know you were in Sedona," I continued, my voice calm, clinical. "I know you were at L'Auberge. I know you were with Harper." He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. He looked like a fish on a dock. "But we can talk about the affair later," I said, leaning forward. "That's not the urgent part." "Urgent?" he whispered. "Yeah," I said. "I need to ask you something important. Does she know?" Marshall blinked, his brain clearly misfiring, trying to catch up. "Does she know? Does who know what?" "Harper," I said. "Does she know about the illness?" The room went dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. "Illness," Marshall repeated. The word came out strangled. I assumed she told you, I said, frowning slightly, playing the confusion perfectly. I mean, if you guys were together for 2 weeks, in a cottage, sharing a bed, I assumed she would have disclosed it. Marshall dropped his fork. It clattered against the ceramic bowl, loud and violent. What illness, Imogen? His voice was rising now. Panic was setting in. Oh God, I said, covering my mouth with my hand. She didn't tell you? Marshall, seriously? Tell me what? He stood up, knocking the table with his thighs. The wine in his glass sloshed over the rim onto the white tablecloth. Look, I don't want to violate her privacy, I said, looking down, but I saw the medical correspondence when I was looking when I found the other stuff. It's serious, Marshall. Highly contagious. Viral. Viral? He grabbed his throat, instinctively, like he could feel something closing up. The incubation period is about 10 days, I said, looking at him with pity. Symptoms start with a fever, then. Well, it gets bad. Permanent damage if not treated immediately. Is it HIV? Herpes? What is it? He was hyperventilating. I'm not a doctor, I said, but if I were you, if I had been exposed the way I think you were exposed, I would be getting to a clinic right now, like tonight. Marshall looked at me, searching for the lie, but I gave him nothing. I gave him pure, unadulterated concern. You're lying, he said, but his voice shook. You're just trying to scare me. Okay, I said, picking up my wine glass. I'm lying. Sit down. Finish your risotto. Let's talk about the divorce. I took a sip. He stared at me. Then he stared at his hands. Then he grabbed his phone from the table. He dialed a number. Harper. I watched him. Ring, ring, ring. Pick up, he hissed. Pick up, pick up, pick up. Voicemail. He dialed again. His fingers were fumbling. Ring, ring, ring. Why isn't she answering? He shouted at the phone. Maybe she's busy, I said, or maybe she's dealing with the symptoms. That broke him. Where is the closest clinic? He demanded, looking around the room frantically like the answer was written on the walls. City MD on Flatbush closes at 9, I said, checking my watch. It's 8:15. You can probably make it if you run. He looked at his suitcase, then at the door, then at me. Go, I said. Go get tested. We can't have a conversation if you're spiraling about dying. I'm not spiraling, he yelled, his eyes wide and terrified. What is it called? What do I tell the doctor? Just tell them you've been exposed to a high-risk partner who withheld a diagnosis, I said. Ask for a full panel, blood, swab, everything. He grabbed his keys. He didn't even grab a jacket. He just turned and bolted for the door. Marshall, I called out. He stopped, hand on the doorknob, looking back at me with wild eyes. Don't come back until you have the results, I said. He slammed the door. I heard his footsteps thundering down the hallway, then the heavy clang of the stairwell door. I sat there for a moment in the silence. Then I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 2 weeks. There is no illness, I whispered to the empty room. I stood up and carried his bowl of risotto to the sink. I scraped it into the garbage disposal. He was going to spend the next 2 hours sitting in a fluorescent-lit waiting room, sweating, shaking, imagining his genitals falling off, terrified that his life was over. He was going to feel exactly how I felt sitting in that ER waiting room while I lost our baby, helpless, terrified, alone. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. I cleared the table. I moved the candles. I went to the living room and retrieved the evidence box, a shoe box I'd kept under the bed for the last week. I poured myself a glass of the Pinot Noir he'd opened. It was a $60 bottle. I drank it out of a juice glass because I didn't care anymore. I began to lay out the table. Center stage, the lease agreement. I taped the pages together so it folded out like a map. Marshall, Brenner, and Harper Willis. Left side, the financials, the Amex statement with the couples massage, highlighted in neon yellow, the bank transfer receipt for the $30,000, right side, the text transcripts. I had printed the screenshot of the "marriage is dead" text. I blew it up to 200% zoom so the pixels were grainy, but the words were legible. I sat on the couch, legs crossed, wine in hand. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Marshall. They are taking me back now. The wait was insane. Still no answer from Harper. Imogen, please tell me what she has. I'm freaking out. I swiped the notification away. 10 minutes later. Marshall. Doctor is asking for specifics. Was it Hep C? Syphilis? Please answer me. I took a sip of wine. 20 minutes later. Marshall. They drew blood. Said rapid results in 30 mins. I feel sick. I think I have a fever. The power of suggestion is a beautiful thing. He didn't have a fever. He had a guilty conscience manifesting as heat. I waited. The apartment was dark, lit only by the streetlights filtering in through the blinds and the one lamp I'd left on by the couch. It felt like an interrogation room. At 10:30 p.m., the key turned in the lock again. Marshall walked in. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 hours. His hair was messy, his sweatpants were rumpled, and he was holding a stack of discharge papers. He saw me on the couch. He didn't see the coffee table yet. It was in the shadows. I'm clean, he said, his voice raspy. He waved the papers. Negative for everything. Rapid HIV, Hep. Everything they could test for here. They're sending the rest to a lab, but the doctor said I look fine. He leaned against the doorframe, looking at me with a mix of relief and sudden, sharp anger. Why didn't you answer my texts? He snapped. I was sitting there thinking I was dying, Imogen. Good, I said. Good? What is wrong with you? He walked into the room, tossing the papers onto the armchair. You told me she had a disease. Do you know how humiliating that was? Explaining to a stranger that your mistress might have infected you? I finished for him. He froze. The word mistress hung in the air. There is no illness, Marshall, I said, setting my glass down. Harper is perfectly healthy, as far as I know. He blinked. What? I made it up. You what? His face contorted. You made it up? You sent me to the ER for nothing? I needed you to feel it, I said, my voice rising just slightly. I needed you to feel the panic, the fear, the uncertainty. I needed you to sit in a waiting room and wonder if your life was over, because that's what I've been doing. You're psycho, he muttered, shaking his head. You are actually crazy. I can't believe you did that. Oh, I'm the crazy one, I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Turn on the light, Marshall. What? The lamp, by your elbow. Turn it on. He reached out and clicked the switch. The light flooded the coffee table. He looked down. He saw the lease. He saw the text messages. He saw the highlighted bank statement. The anger drained out of him instantly, replaced by the hollow look of a man who realizes the executioner has been standing behind him the whole time. Sit down, I commanded. He didn't sit. He stared at the lease. Where did you get this? Does it matter? I asked. You signed a lease for an apartment in Park Slope. Move-in date December 1st, 2 weeks from now. He rubbed his face with both hands. Imogen, look, don't. I cut him off. Don't you dare start with it's not what it looks like. It is exactly what it looks like. You stole $30,000 from our savings account, money we were saving for a house, and used it to bankroll a love nest with your coworker. I wasn't stealing it, he stammered. I was going to pay it back. I have a bonus coming. You were going to pay it back after you divorced me? I asked incredulously. How generous of you. I pointed to the Amex statement. The couple's ritual, $520. Did you enjoy the energy balancing, Marshall? Did it align your chakras? We were just caught up in the moment, he pleaded. He finally sat down on the edge of the armchair, looking small. It started as a work thing. We connected. I didn't plan for this to happen. You didn't plan it? I grabbed the lease and threw it at him. The pages fluttered to the floor. You signed a 2-year lease. That is the definition of a plan. You booked the trip 2 weeks in advance. You bought new cologne. You bought new clothes. This wasn't an accident. This was a campaign. I was unhappy, he yelled, finally snapping. Okay, is that what you want to hear? I've been unhappy for a long time. We drifted apart. We're roommates, Imogen. We don't talk. We don't connect. I met someone who makes me feel alive again. We drifted apart? I repeated. 3 months ago on our anniversary, you cried at dinner. You told me I was the love of your life. You wrote me a card that said, forever. I was trying, he argued. I was trying to make it work, but it felt dead. I didn't know how to tell you. So instead of telling me, you told Harper our marriage had been dead for years? I pointed to the blown-up text screenshot. He looked at the paper. He read his own words. The marriage has been dead for years. We're just roommates. He choked. I said that to make her feel better. She felt guilty. Oh, well, as long as Harper felt better, I said, dripping with sarcasm. I love her, Imogen, he said softly. The words hit me like a physical blow. I thought I was ready for them, but hearing him say it, hearing him admit he loved this woman he'd known for 18 months more than the woman he'd built a decade with, it winded me. But I didn't cry. I had one more card to play, the trump card. You love her, I repeated flatly. I do. I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you, but I can't help how I feel. Okay, I said. Let's talk about love. Let's talk about November 4th. Marshall looked confused. What? November 4th, 2 weeks ago, Tuesday. I don't know what. I called you 17 times that morning, I said. Do you remember? He frowned, searching his memory. I was in meetings. I told you I couldn't talk. You weren't in meetings, I said. I checked the timestamps on your texts to Harper. That was the morning you booked L'Auberge. That was the morning you were texting her about how excited you were to sleep with her. So, I was busy booking the trip. I couldn't talk. Do you know why I was calling you, Marshall? He looked at me, and for the first time, true dread entered his eyes. Not the frantic panic of the clinic, but a deep, sinking horror. Why? I was in the ER, I said. My voice didn't shake. I was miscarrying our baby. His mouth opened. His eyes went wide. What? I was 8 weeks pregnant. We were going to have a baby, and while I was lying on a gurney, bleeding, losing our child, you were texting your mistress that your marriage was dead and booking a romance package in Sedona. Imogen, no. Tears welled up in his eyes instantly. No, you're lying. You weren't. I have the hospital discharge papers right here, I said, tapping the folder on the table. I went through it alone. I came home alone. And I grieved alone, because you were too busy to answer your phone. Oh my God, he sobbed. He actually put his head in his hands and sobbed. Oh my God, Imogen, if I had known, I would have come home. I swear to God I would have come home. Would you? I asked. Or would you have been annoyed that I was ruining your plans? No, it's a baby, our baby. He reached out to grab my hand. I pulled back like he was fire. Don't touch me. I'm so sorry, he wailed. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't bring it back, I said. And sorry doesn't change the fact that when I needed my husband, my partner, he was busy erasing me to make room for someone else. I stood up. The energy in the room had shifted. He wasn't the arrogant executive anymore. He was a broken, sobbing mess. And I felt nothing. I'm done, I said. I want you out. Out? He looked up, wiping snot from his nose. Where am I supposed to go? I don't care, I said. Go to a hotel. Go to Russell's. Go to the apartment in Park Slope if they'll let you move in early. But you aren't staying here. Imogen, please, it's late. I'm exhausted. Can I sleep on the couch? We can figure this out tomorrow. No. I walked to the door and opened it wide. Get your bag, the one you haven't unpacked yet, and leave. He stood up shakily. He looked around the apartment like he was seeing it for the first time. He grabbed his suitcase. He paused at the door. I'm going to fix this. Not us. I know us is done, but I'm going to make this right. Just go, I said. He walked out into the hallway. He pulled out his phone again. I'm going to go to Harper's, he muttered, mostly to himself. She'll let me stay. I leaned against the doorframe. She won't answer, Marshall. He stopped. He turned to look at me. Why do you keep saying that? Why isn't she answering? I smiled. It was a small, sad smile. Because I emailed her husband on Saturday, I said. Marshall dropped his phone. It hit the hallway carpet with a dull thud. You told Malcolm? I sent him everything, I said. The lease, the texts, the photos. I'm guessing Harper is currently having a very similar conversation with him right now. Or maybe she's already out on the street, too. You destroyed her life, he whispered. She has kids. She destroyed her own life, I said. And you destroyed ours. I just turned on the lights. You're a monster, he said. Maybe, I said, but I'm a monster with an apartment. Goodbye, Marshall. I slammed the door in his face. I locked the deadbolt. I put the chain on. I listened. Silence. Then a string of profanity. Then the sound of elevator buttons being mashed. When he was gone, I walked back to the living room. I picked up the lease agreement and ripped it in half. Then I ripped it again. I poured the rest of the wine into my glass. I sat down on the couch. I didn't cry. I drank the wine, and I slept for 12 hours. 3 months later, I met Malcolm for coffee yesterday. It was strange. We sat in a cafe in Brooklyn Heights, two people who had never met but knew the most intimate details of each other's trauma. How are the girls? I asked. Confused, Malcolm said. He looked tired but clearer than he had in the photos. We're doing the nesting thing. I stay in the house during the week. Harper stays on weekends. We swap. It's hell, honestly, but we're trying to keep it stable for them. Is she still with Marshall? Malcolm stirred his coffee. No, she blames him. Says he wasn't careful enough. Says he ruined everything. He laughed bitterly. Apparently, romance dies pretty fast when you're both sleeping on friends' couches. Marshall is living in a studio in Jersey City, I said. He hates it. Good. My divorce isn't final yet, but the settlement is signed. It was a bloodbath. Marshall tried to fight me on the assets, claiming the Phoenix trip shouldn't count as marital dissipation. My lawyer, a shark named Victoria, laughed in his face. She threatened to depose Malcolm and drag Harper into court to testify about the affair. Marshall folded immediately. I got the apartment. I got 70% of our savings. I got reimbursed for every penny he spent on the Phoenix trip, the spa, the dinners, the hotel, but the money is just math. The real victory was the quiet. I walked home from the coffee shop. It was February now. The air was crisp. I walked past the park where we used to talk about baby names. It hurt, but it was a dull ache, like an old injury when it rains, not the sharp, stabbing pain of November. I got back to the apartment, my apartment. I had painted the living room. The beige was gone, replaced by a soft, cool sage green. I bought a new couch, a velvet one that Marshall would have hated. I stood in the center of the room. It was quiet. No lies, no secrets, no second phone vibrating on the table. I wasn't happy yet. Happy felt like a destination I was still hiking toward, miles away, but I was safe. I was standing on solid ground. My phone buzzed. A text from Jonah, my neighbor. Jonah, hey, a few of us are grabbing drinks at the corner bar tonight. You should come. No pressure. I looked at the text. Then I looked at the reflection in the window. The woman staring back looked tired, yes, but she also looked like someone who had survived a fire. Imogen, I'll be there in 20. I put my phone in my pocket, grabbed my coat, and walked out the door. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.